Welcome everyone to the Suffolk County Council event, which is part of our East Suffolk Business Festival 2022. Today we are pleased to be joined by event partner Chris Grover from Suffolk County Council to talk about happy and healthier employees through sustainable workplace travel in the digital age. Our annual East Suffolk Business Festival is an opportunity for businesses to learn something new, find out what's happening in their local area and how they can get involved and find out how to access local support programs. For 2022, the theme for this year's Business Festival is all things digital, and the events will include the launch of digital business support programs, digital tech demos, information on local digital projects, and a wide range of workshops, webinars, and learning seminars. All the events are being held online to enable local businesses to access the support and information they need more conveniently, so they can just pop in during their working day. Recorded events, podcasts, and pre-recorded webinars will be made available throughout the 2-week period and beyond at our website, eastsuffolkmeansbusiness.co.uk. This is one of the many events scheduled, so to find out about other events taking place, please visit the website. Please note that today's event is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back later via the website. If you'd like to ask any questions throughout today's event, please either submit a question via the Q&A button on the bottom bar of your screen or add a question to the chat, but please ensure that this is to all attendees so it does not get missed. I'm now pleased to hand over to Chris.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Jo. Good morning, everyone. So we're going to have a little look at sustainable travel this morning and you know, how we can use some digital technology to help encourage and embed sort of that behavior change that we're looking for. We're going to start by talking about why now, and then we'll look through the various sort of opportunities available to businesses and individuals to change the way that they travel. And then I say conclude with some look at sort of some of the apps that allow us to embed these behaviors and make for a sustainable commute that's long lasting. Here's a web page or a screen grab of a web page from the East Anglian Daily Times from just a few weeks ago, at the end of December last year. Flooding, heat waves, heavy snow, gallery of Suffolk's weather last year. And I think we're all aware that, you know, time after time, we hear about weather events on the news, and we tend to think of them in isolation. Oh, it's been a hot few weeks this summer. Oh, haven't we had a lot of rain this autumn? There's occasional bits of flooding and it's a minor inconvenience, but all added together, these are quite significant, these events. If we look at 2020, along with 2016, the joint warmest year on record at the end of the warmest decade on record. I'm not particularly a betting man, but if I was, I think I'd be putting my money on this decade that we're in now being even warmer rather than putting my money into Bitcoin. We know that we're on a trajectory and you know, we know we need to do something about it. Cast your mind back to 2015 to the Paris Climate Accords. There was much fanfare at the time, much backslapping. You know, there was a new kind of impetus around climate change and sustainability and making the world better for future generations. And globally, we resolved to keep global warming to 2 degrees or less by the end of this century, and ideally 1.5 degrees. That was only 7 years ago. And yet now we're expecting to exceed that target by 2040 and possibly go on to double it by the end of the century. So things have got a lot worse in the last 7 years, not a lot better. And these are UN figures from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. How does it affect us in the UK? We tend to think of climate change as being something that, you know, is going to increase droughts in perhaps sub-Saharan Africa. It's going to cause flooding and you know, possibly the demise of small island communities in the Indian Ocean. How does it affect us? Well, financially is one way it's going to affect us. The cost of flooding in the UK could rise by 15 times in the next 60 years. So that's going to impact all of our pockets, particularly here in Suffolk. And in East Suffolk, you know, we know there are challenges with coastal flooding. We have high tides throughout the year that are increasingly coming with an attached Met Office warning to them. So really, we all need to acknowledge that we all have a part to play in the sort of the change needed to make our future sustainable and pleasant and comfortable. It's not often you'll find me quoting Ronald Reagan, and I'm unable to attribute exactly what this quote came from. I suspect it wasn't climate change because the Republican Party back in the 1980s didn't really talk about climate change in the US. But I do love it because the status quo, it is a mess that we're in and we can't keep on with it. So across Suffolk, the councils have banded together and declared a climate emergency for Suffolk. We're all working together to work towards net zero by the end of this decade, by 2030. And my particular part of that is around sustainable travel. Transport is one of the big bad boys in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. More than a quarter of emissions that we produce come from transport, and over half of that is from private cars and from taxis. So, is the glass half full or half empty? Well, I look at that as a huge opportunity for change that we have, and some real influence that we can bring to bear there to change people's behaviour. Our government have set a target, half of all journeys within towns and cities to be made by walking or cycling by the end of this decade again, so just 8 years away. And again, there's an opportunity for that to happen because over half of car journeys are under 5 miles and a quarter under 2 miles. So 2 miles, if you're walking briskly, it's about 35 minutes. If you're cycling, 2 miles is about 10 minutes on a bike. 5 miles on a bike, if you're cycling, it's 25 minutes. If you're on an electric bike, it's possibly less, nearer to 20 minutes. So real opportunity for change here, and a real chance for everyone to play their part in bringing about this reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that we so desperately need. Now, as the public sector, I mentioned we're doing our bit. We've declared a climate emergency, but across Suffolk, we're responsible directly for about 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and we can influence, perhaps a third of them in total. So an example of direct emissions might be that, the fire service is run by Suffolk County Council. Perhaps we can look at fire engines fueled by alternatives to internal combustion engines. That's direct influence. Or it might be schools can have a sustainable biomass boiler rather than an oil boiler. That's the direct influence. And then the kind of arm's length influence that we have, well, that's again us, let's say, working with schools where we can put in place plans to discourage people from driving their children to school. Maybe it's more opportunities for public transport. Maybe, as we're doing with a couple of schools now, we're looking at opportunities to close the roads outside those schools during school drop-off and pick-up times so that people have to park further away. We make it less convenient to drive, but we make it safer for children. We make the air quality around those schools better for them, and we bring about that kind of shift in travel. And there's a bit of an elephant in the room I mentioned there, and that's that word inconvenience. We are all going to have to be slightly more inconvenienced compared to what we're used to doing now. We're all very used to jumping in our car and traveling door to door, and that's not the way that we're going to get to the sustainable future that we need. I can hear people saying, well, what about electric vehicles? And there's massive growth from a relatively small base there. Electric vehicles are part of the solution. They aren't the solution. From the point of view of the work I do in terms of active travel, an electric vehicle is good in that, provided you're charging it from a sustainable and renewable energy source, there aren't any greenhouse gas emissions from using it. There's a lot of embodied energy in creating a car, an electric car, and particularly, the batteries. There are some challenges around some of the metals used in the batteries, etc. But electric vehicles don't solve the congestion problems that we see in our urban areas particularly. And they don't solve the health crisis that we have with people being inactive. So electric vehicles are one of the tools in the toolkit, but they're not the only tool in the toolkit, and they can't be, unfortunately. So we are all going to have to learn to travel by other ways. And hopefully by looking at some of the benefits in traveling other ways, we can actually make that inconvenience. We can turn that around into a positive in the lives of both people and our businesses and communities. So I suppose let's start with that. What's in it for me? Why should I travel in a more active way? If I'm one of those 56% of people traveling by car for less than 5 miles, why should I travel by bike or walk or public transport and walk, a combination? Well, financial. This is figures are a few years old now, but typically average commuting costs are around £800. I suspect if you live in a slightly more rural area of East Suffolk, you could easily double that. There's a lot of people in terms of the average that perhaps only travel a couple of miles in a city that bring that figure down to sort of £800 or £795. So, comfortably in East Suffolk, I would say £1,500 is the average commuting costs for an individual. If you could save a chunk of that money by walking, cycling, combination of public transport and walking, that's got to be good for you. Health. We all know that we should try and do our 5 half hours a week of moderate exercise. Moderate exercise, well, that means kind of a brisk walk, a modest cycle ride, something where you're slightly out of breath and if you're holding a conversation with someone, there's a bit of puffing and panting to keep up with the conversation. That's moderate exercise. If you're exercising at a lower level, then I'm afraid we have to double that to 5 hours a week. But let's go with the 5 half hours of moderate exercise. So achieving this reduces your risk of mortality quite significantly, 10 or 11%. But of particular benefit here is the reduction in many chronic conditions. So we talk about things like diabetes, heart attack, stroke, 30%, and in some cases even 40% reduction in those conditions. So that's a massive benefit for the individual. It's also a massive benefit for society because those conditions tend to be the ones that bear some of the biggest burdens in terms of ongoing health costs. But just for now, let's think about the individual. Living with those conditions is very challenging. It impacts your life and what you're able to achieve, and you have to work around them, of course, but a massive opportunity to reduce that by a significant percentage by incorporating some active travel into your weekly routine. And well-being. So this is an 18-year study, the British Household Panel Survey. So this is a very rigorous survey on which government base many, many decisions that they make. And an 18-year study suggests that people who travel in an active way, so walking, cycling, tend to find that they feel better for it. They have a greater sense of well-being and less sense of what we call strain. We've all sat in traffic and we know what that does to you. Sitting in traffic, ironically, your heart rate probably increases when you're late for an appointment compared to if you're actually walking or cycling to get to that meeting. So, exercise is good for us and we feel better for it. Okay, this is very much a business festival. So, why should a business get behind this? Why as a business should you work either for yourself as a sole trader or for your employees? Why should you help them to achieve this? Surely there's enough incentive there for them to want to do it on their own. Well, possibly, but there are benefits to you as a business as well. And we'll talk about a couple of them. Productivity. So investment in employee health increases job satisfaction and reduces churn. This is really important, particularly at the moment. Employee churn, you need to reduce it as much as possible. We know what a competitive labour market it is out there. The economy has record vacancies at the moment. We know how hard it is to recruit good staff. And we've seen a report a couple of weeks ago saying that staff aren't just demanding more money now to come and work for you, but they want flexible working. They want to work from home some of the time. They want to talk about the benefits that you can add as well as the financial recompense. So having employees who are kind of healthy and satisfied in their work and staying put, not looking around, is good for your business. And productivity, how great, between 10 and 25%. Well, what business wouldn't want to add that to the bottom line? So investment in employee health pays back over time quite quickly for a business. Reduced absenteeism. People who are active, we've talked about that reduction in chronic conditions. Those people are going to have less time off sick. Stands to reason, really, doesn't it? So surely that's a reason as a business to promote active travel and to facilitate that in your workplace. There are two figures here: 27% fewer sick days from employees that are physically active, 20% overall reduction in absenteeism. So they're kind of two figures that say the same thing, but slightly different. And I'm not going to get into the minutiae of those details. I've included the references at the end of the presentation for anyone who does want to explore a bit more. But what we're saying is that individuals are likely to take 27% less days off overall across your team by promoting healthier travel and by giving them a workplace and work rotas that facilitate that. You can reduce your overall absenteeism rates by 20%. So, a fifth more time people being productive in your business. And then reduce congestion. So this is a kind of everyone pull together. This is a stat from the British Chambers of Commerce. So a very pro-business body, as you would imagine. And they've calculated that the average effect of congestion in the UK to businesses is £17,000 per business. That obviously, depending on your business, that's going to have a greater or lesser impact. If you're a BT at Martlesham Heath, I suspect it has a greater than £17,000 impact on your business. If you're running a retail outlet in Saxmundham or Leiston, it's probably less than £17,000 a year. But there is an impact on your business. And once all of us start to travel in a more active way and to perhaps run our businesses in a way that facilitates more sustainable travel. For instance, we're offering businesses in East Suffolk at the moment a free electric cargo bike trial. So if we can take these vehicles off the road and replace them with walking and cycling and public transport, then all businesses benefit from that, including your business. And that benefits the bottom line. So, 3 reasons there, all with a big financial impact in a positive sense for your business by moving your employees and the way you work to a more active and sustainable route. And then finally, society. So what are the wider benefits of all of this, beyond kind of reducing CO2 emissions and making the planet more sustainable in the future? Switching to active travel for these short trips, these trips under 5 miles, could save 17 billion for the NHS over 20 years. So I kind of think, well, that's a big number. Let's try and put that in some context. I've got no idea what a typical outpatient appointment costs in a hospital, but let's say, humour me, let's say it costs £800 for someone to go and see a consultant or a doctor for half an hour. On that basis, that's 1 million more appointments a year that our NHS could deliver if we all travelled in an active way for those 5 mile and under journeys. Imagine what the NHS would look like if we could suddenly wave a magic wand and deliver 1 million appointments a year through active travel. So there's a big societal benefit there. We've talked about exercise and the fact that almost 40% of adults in England don't achieve the necessary level. But levelling up is something that the government talk about, and they talk about it in a geographical context across the whole of England. Even within our county, there is a wide discrepancy between the amount of activity that people undertake. And we can see there that if you're in the most affluent part, groups of people, you're 40% more likely than the least affluent to have the necessary exercise each week. Now, there is a benefit, again, to society, to businesses, by bringing that bottom level of activity up so that everyone is reaching the recommended levels of activity. And let's get rid of that discrepancy, because ultimately the people who are least affluent are probably also the people that are running the most polluting vehicles, the people that are trying to keep old cars on the road, etc. So by encouraging all parts of our society to be active, there is an enhanced benefit in terms of the sustainability and the environmental benefit. We haven't talked significantly about mental health yet, but I'm sure it's well documented that there is a massive mental health benefit for regular exercise, and a big reduction in depression between a fifth and a third almost for people who are achieving their 5.5 hours of moderate exercise a week. And this is kind of very much a cyclical thing. So the Joseph Rowntree Foundation did a study, and whilst you might expect that mental ill health and depression to be a factor that comes from poverty, it works the other way around as well, in that mental ill health is a significant contributory factor to poverty. So by being more active, by travelling in a more active way, we can actually help to reduce poverty in society, as well as helping people out of poverty. So that's a win-win, if you like. That's a sort of double win there for mental health in terms of active and sustainable travel. And probably very relevant to today and to this audience, when we choose to travel in an active mean or by public transport, we spend more money with local business. I can give you a couple of examples from my own life here. So I live in Debenham, about 14-15 miles north of Ipswich, and I commute into the Suffolk County Council office in the middle of Ipswich. I tend to cycle in. If I drive in, I drive straight to our car park next to Endeavour House, park there, do my work and drive home. If I cycle, I'm far more likely to stop and meet colleagues or ex-colleagues where I used to work at the East Anglian Daily Times at the Woolpack at the bottom of Westfield Road. We'll stop and have a drink on the way home. So I'll spend a bit of money in a local business there because I'm cycling. If I catch the bus in, which I do on occasion, I'm very lucky that there's a convenient bus outside my house that leaves Debenham at 7:05, gets me into Ipswich at 8:05 in the morning. I walk through from Museum Street in Ipswich, and there is a stall in the town a couple of times a week that does coffee. So I'll buy my double espresso and drink that on the way to the office. Again, you're driving by car, neither of those would happen. So by traveling in an active or public transport way or mode, I'm spending more money with local businesses. And this is borne out time and time again, whether it's parents walking children to school, whether it's people commuting to work. We stop, our public spaces become much more inhabitable, much more livable. We spend money with local businesses and we reconnect with each other. So there's a real economic argument for active and sustainable travel there. And, particularly in East Suffolk, where, we are blessed with some of the nicest market towns and some really interesting retail and service businesses in those towns. It's a great opportunity to actually take a bit more time, explore your local area and invest in those local businesses. Of course, this is a very rosy picture that we painted, and we've got to start somewhere. There are challenges. I tend to come at it, as I said earlier, from the sort of the glass is half full perspective. But there are big issues. There are perceived safety and confidence issues. If you're not a regular cyclist, then cycling in traffic is the #1 issue that people say time and time again in study after study. They don't want to cycle in traffic. The cry goes up, well, why can't we have more segregated cycle lanes? You'd be preaching to the converted if you asked me that. But I understand that, this is a real challenge in many of our towns where there is already pressure on road space. And, in terms of businesses and congestion, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. We talked earlier about the congestion and the cost of business. Imagine if some of our market towns in East Suffolk, we were to take out 30% of the carriageway in the main street in those towns to put in segregated cycle lanes. There would be an outcry, and rightly so, from businesses in those areas. So we have to work our way around this, and we have to start with a certain amount of change, and that reduces the congestion, and then we can start to build in the infrastructure to support that and enhance that. There is progress being made, though. The latest government guidance in terms of cycling infrastructure particularly, and the creation of a body called Active Travel England, and you may have seen Chris Boardman, the Olympic and Tour de France cyclist, is heading that body up, have said they will only award funding to local authorities where cycle lanes are put in that are properly segregated from traffic. So, it's no longer possible for a local authority to paint some lines down one side of the road and call it a cycle lane and get government funding for that. That's not going to count anymore. It has to be a proper segregated and safe job. So change is happening there. It's not going to happen at the pace that I would like, but it is going to come. And other areas, walking and walking certain areas or after dark. And I know there's a lot of development going on at the moment with apps and mobile telecommunications companies looking to produce apps that make people feel safer. And in fact, it's happened as well with cycling. You can now get rear lights for your bike. If the bike falls over and it's not picked up within 30 seconds, it sends a text to your nominated phone warning them that something's happened. So digital technology is beginning to play a significant role here in helping us to feel safer in our communities at times that we might not be at the moment. Access to cycling and appropriate safety equipment. Certainly we talked about some of the more disadvantaged or less affluent people in our society. Bikes are not cheap. We would say, yes, you can get a new bike for £200, but realistically, if you want something that's going to last a few years and you're not going to spend a fortune on replacing parts, it's probably £400 to £500 to get yourself a reasonable bike that can be maintained and will give you several years of good service if you're going to be using it on a regular basis. And that's a big chunk of money for some people. Safety equipment, helmets, again, 20, 30, £40. But I'm very keen to point out that we're not about everyone having to don their lycra to get to work. We want people to walk and to cycle in the clothes that they go to work in, because otherwise we've lost, we can't do it. So it's making sure people have access to the appropriate equipment, but also access to being able to commute in a way that is part of, if you like, part of their work and not an add-on or a separate thing to do. Not everyone has the fitness or the ability to walk or cycle, and we can put in place programs, and I'll come on to some of the help that we can do around that a bit later on. Public transport routes aren't always the most convenient, and it's a sort of bus operation has been slightly more removed from local authority operation, that's sometimes become a bit harder to manipulate. However, there is a willingness amongst our bus companies following the pandemic and the challenges they've had over the last couple of years to engage much more with both local authorities and with businesses, and to trial alternatives. So an example that we look at the moment is the park and ride that runs from Martlesham through Ipswich to the Copdock junction. We're talking to the university in Suffolk because they have more and more students that are coming out to Martlesham. So we're looking at possibly changing the park and ride route to incorporate a loop around the university. And the bus company are happy to engage with that. So, there are opportunities to engage here, and the doors are very much open if they're pushed. Inclusivity. So, there are certain groups within our society that would like to be more active, but perhaps don't feel they have the opportunity. And we're talking, particularly disabled, Black, Asian and minority ethnicities, and women. All of those groups are less likely to travel in an active way or feel able to. And this is where we come in as local authority in terms of offering particular support for those groups, but also as business, we want you to play your part to involve us and to help some of these groups. Women want to cycle as much as men, believe it or not, but are 50% less likely to because of perceived issues around safety, comfort, etc. So we've got a big job to do there, because actually that shouldn't be the case. The Netherlands are often quoted, but we only need to look across the North Sea, where women are as likely to cycle as men, if not more so. And in terms of climate, it's similar to ours. In terms of landscape, actually, it's not that dissimilar to Suffolk. In terms of it's sort of fairly flat nature and fairly windy. So I don't think genetically Suffolk females are that different from Dutch females. So we have a massive opportunity there to support more women to get into cycling and walking and active travel. And so, some of these solutions, and we kind of touched on them, but provision of free cycle training to build skills and confidence. There is support available for this. Longer term, we've talked about the development of segregated cycle lanes, and that will come as the shift starts to move towards active travel. Free trial schemes. So many of you as businesses might already have the Cycle to Work scheme in place, where your employees can take advantage of a tax-free bike and spread the cost of that over 12 months. But we also need to look at other schemes. And at Suffolk County Council, we're working with a couple of organisations now where we are helping to find sort of bikes that people no longer want. It might be a bike that's been stuck out in the garden for 2 or 3 years, bits have rusted on it, etc. These organisations are bringing those bikes back to life, and they're selling them for £10 or £20 to people who could really benefit from having a bike, but perhaps don't have the affluence to be able to go to a cycle shop and spend £500. So we're working hard to achieve more of that. We can look at splitting journeys. So we talked about sort of the 2 miles and the 5 miles right at the beginning of this presentation and those car journeys. Well, some people, a 2 mile walk, it's maybe something they're not able to achieve at the moment due to an existing health condition. So let's look at perhaps identifying areas around our urban areas where they can perhaps drive halfway and walk halfway and slowly build up a level of fitness. This is something that we're doing with schools. I mentioned about the idea around closing streets outside schools. It's called Park and Stride, and school children love this because actually they're naturally sociable. There's nothing they love more than to get out of the car where they are with their parent or carer and start walking along the pavement where they're going to bump into their friends. Throw a scooter in the boot and you've got an absolute winner there. So we need to do more Park and Stride perhaps as businesses and not just for schools. And we need to look at what adaptations we can make for people who aren't as physically able as perhaps everyone else in society, and how we can support them. I've talked about engaging with network operators on public transport, and that's happening now in Suffolk. So that's to kind of tick that box. So there's all sorts of solutions here to help people, and targeted information around some of those groups that are less likely to walk or cycle is beginning to come to fruition. Within our team at Suffolk County Council, we have a chap from Cycling UK who's working with us for a year, and he's identified a group of women at the mosque in Ipswich who are keen to start cycling. There are various barriers to them doing that. and we've actually sort of worked with them to identify those barriers, and we're overcoming them. So we've identified a female bike mechanic, for instance. They'll feel more comfortable having a female mechanic working with them. That's something that we've been able to put in place. So, as a business, you may not have all the answers that you think you need to help your employees travel in a more sustainable fashion, but do talk to us, because the chances are you're not the first person who's come up against that challenge. And if we haven't got an answer, we'll get our heads together and we'll find one for you. How do you get started? Well, the first place, I suppose, is what your staff currently do. So do you know, as a business, if you're a small business, perhaps you're a shop in Leiston with 3 or 4 staff, you probably know where they live and how they get to you. And the chances are that, that's in many cases, they travel in a sustainable way already. But if you're a slightly larger business, do you really know? So I had a meeting with a business in Framlingham this week. They've got 75 employees. They're very interested in sort of seeing how we can support them to encourage more of their employees to travel in an active sense. And we're going to start with a travel survey. And then what we'll do is we'll take that data, we'll anonymize it, and we'll postcode plot it, and we'll start to see if there are any patterns there that we can pick up on. So in terms of, for instance, encouraging people into cycling into Framlingham, it might be that we can identify 10 employees who live on a route that comes down from, I don't know, let's say Stradbroke Way, and we can bring them down almost as a cycling bus. We can put a ride leader in for that, and therefore we can encourage and support those people to get into traveling in that active way. So we need to know where we're starting from, and we have some very simple staff surveys. We do them with primary schools all the time as a hands-up survey at registration, and it's basically, how do you currently travel to work, and in a perfect world, how would you like to travel to work? Or when we do it for the school survey, inevitably most of the kids seem to say they'd like to travel to school by motorbike, so we don't probably need to rejig that option on the survey. We would ask you to build your active travel conversations into staff communications, and again, we can support with that, and I'll give you examples of how we can do that. But by talking about this, it becomes commonplace, it becomes the norm. If we're not talking about it, and then we suddenly do it's bike to work day once a year, then it becomes a bit awkward and uncomfortable, and no one's ready for it, and we don't know what we mean, and the bike isn't ready, etc. So by building in regular conversations around this as part of staff newsletters or emails, if you're a bigger business, it keeps that conversation sort of bubbling along at a low intensity. Cycle to work scheme we've talked about, but have you thought about perhaps having a loan bike or an electric bike that staff can borrow? I've had a conversation with Adnams recently up in Southwold. They're very proactive in terms of sustainability within their business, and they've got a couple of electric bikes that staff use to get back and forth between the distribution centre and the middle of Southwold, and they can use them for lunch, so that when they go into Southwold from the distribution centre at lunchtime, they haven't got the hassle of trying to find somewhere to park. They can nip into the co-op, get their lunch and go back, and it's nice and easy for them. So, are there opportunities for you as a business to do something like that? Remember, we talked earlier about that employee engagement and that reduced churn. So yes, there's an outlay to buying an electric bike, but actually there's goodwill to come from that in terms of what your employees will feel towards you as an employer. I know, I'm perhaps sort of an extreme example, but for me, one of the biggest things in terms of working for a business, and this happened across the last 2 or 3 businesses that I've worked at, is actually having somewhere to shower when I get to work in Ipswich. That if I didn't have somewhere to shower, then there would need to be an awful lot of alternative benefits and remuneration to attract me to a position, because that's a big thing for me, and that keeps me happy and engaged with my work, believe it or not. We need to encourage employees to gain cycling skills. So again, we can support in terms of putting together refresher courses, etc. And I'll come on to those in the next slide. But as an employer, we would ask you to support and facilitate those by perhaps putting in place times. Could people finish once a month, an hour earlier on a Friday, so that they can go off on a guided ride in the summer, perhaps, and end up, you could all end up at a pub. And actually, that's building that kind of employee engagement, that employee sort of community spirit as well. Have you got the right facilities? Bike parking, are they undercover? Can people lock their bikes securely? Is it well lit? Is there a shower? Are local bus routes convenient? If you're a bigger employer or you have a shift pattern, do your shift patterns match timetables? Or have you thought about approaching the local bus company Not in our area in East Suffolk, but Next nationally are very switched on in terms of active travel and supporting their employees. And they're really one of the standout companies in the UK in that sense. They engaged with a bus company up in Wakefield and Doncaster, where they have a couple of large distribution centres. They actually changed their shift patterns to fit in with the bus operator, and in return, the bus operator changed their routes, and they experienced a significant shift of people travelling by bus into their depots. So you know, these things can happen. They're not just a pipe dream. Doctor Bike, so these are maintenance sessions, and these are something that we support with in terms of the financial cost. So, you know, as an employer, how good would you look in front of your employees if you're saying to them, actually, we'd like all of you to try and be a bit more active the way you come to work. We'd like to be more sustainable, support our goals and ambitions in terms of being a company that's contributing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to put on for you free of charge a Doctor Bike session where the local bike shop is going to come in. They're going to check over your bike that you haven't ridden for 6 months. They'll sort the gearing out for you, oil the chain, fix a puncture, and change the brake box if needed. That's great for you as a business. It's great for them, and it's great for us. Car sharing can be a really effective way, not necessarily in terms of active travel, but in terms of reducing the amount of cars on our roads and reducing the pollution in our urban areas. It can also be a bit of an awkward thing when it's done informally. Many years ago, my wife used to work in Ipswich for AXA, and once gave someone a lift from our village into Ipswich. And then suddenly it was, oh, can I have a lift today? Can I have a lift today? And there was this rather awkward situation where suddenly 4 or 5 days a week, she was giving someone a lift into Ipswich because this person realised that actually it was a lot cheaper for them. They didn't have to pay for parking or petrol. So this is where we can help as a business. We can formalise a car sharing arrangement for you as a business. There are specific mileage rates that are recommended for it. People can join up through a platform that we use called Lift Share, and it makes it a lot easier. There's no awkward conversations. People are happy, and it's done very much as a kind of a business contract. So there's no bad feeling when someone's suddenly not driving today or wants to come in a bit later. It's all kind of sorted for you and takes the hassle out of that, and you know, helps reduce that congestion. So this is very much about digital. This sort of whole series of business events that we're doing with East Suffolk. And there are some digital platforms that we use both to help you in terms of an organisation and also to help individuals embed the change that we're looking to achieve. So we work with a national framework. It's called Mode Shift Stars, and they have platforms for business, for education, and for community housing developments. And by working with Mode Shift Stars, you can gain recognition as a business. So there are bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels of accreditation. And we understand that as a business, you know, if you're putting effort and time into this, A, we want to support you, so we will pay your membership fees for Mode Shift Stars. But B, when you achieve any of these accreditations, we want to shout about that because we want other employers to see the good work that you're doing. So we will do lots of PR around this for you as well, both in our social media and with the local media throughout our county, so you know, newspapers, radio, etc. So please talk to me about Mode Shift Stars. How we can sort of get your business set up on that, and how we can put this framework that it gives us in place so that you're not kind of looking at a blank sheet of paper thinking, well, I want to get my employees traveling in a more active way because I get the benefits of it, but where do I start? Stars gives us that framework. It's got lots of initiatives we can try, and you can gain these rewards on the way that we can sort of shout about for you. Betterpoints is something that we've trialed before, and you can try both. We can try as a local authority, you can try as a business. It's kind of rewarding employees for sustainable travel. So they gain points, and points mean prizes, very literally. They can use their points towards vouchers, they can buy raffle tickets, and they gain badges. And it's what we call the gamification of it. So there are medals and leaderboards, you can set team goals, and it makes the whole thing more fun. You know, I'm sure we all realise that trying to do change, if I'm an employee trying to do that in a vacuum, is a bit of a struggle, particularly this time of year. You know, you get up and you perhaps got to get up 20 minutes earlier because that's when the bus leaves, or that's the time it's going to take you to cycle and then change at your workplace. So you need a bit more of an incentive to do that, and Betterpoints helps to give that incentive, both financial and in terms of kind of team. Individually, There's a platform called Love to Ride. So this is a screenshot actually of my Love to Ride. You can set goals on it. So I've set a goal to cycle 3,000 miles this year. As you can see, that sort of long bar, there's a little yellow bit where I've started. I'm about 200 miles into it. So I've got a way to go yet. But I'm hoping that I'm going to be doing a bit more cycling in the summer. But it's showing me also this sort of area on the right, how many trips I've done, how much carbon dioxide I've saved by cycling, and how many miles I've cycled. And you can also see under my name, works at Suffolk County Council and what team I'm in. So again, we can set up teams on Love to Ride. It's free of charge for individuals to use. There's a social element to it. You can add photos. You can support your kind of work colleagues. And as a team, you as an employer can say, well, why don't we try as XYZ employer to cycle 500 miles as a team this month? So again, it is that kind of feeling part of something, and that gamification of it that's important. Go Jauntily is a walking app. We're having some very strong conversations around working with Go Jauntily at the moment. And this is great for encouraging people to be more active. So people looking for those first steps, perhaps, if you pardon the pun, to leading a more active lifestyle. Find the greenest route from A to B, enjoy a nature-filled circular walk. So Go Jaunty's got all kinds of options. Again, it's free to access the app, and I think about 95, 96% of the content on the app is free to access. So we will identify your location and suggest some walks that you can do from your home, from your workplace. So a lunchtime walk from work as a group of people. Great idea, and a great way to get people being more active in a very gentle way to start them off. The thing I love about Go Jauntily is that when you're doing a walk, a lot of the walks actually show you the photos of what you should be looking at. So there's no kind of trying to figure out where you are on an OS map, or the footpath looks as if it goes across the field, but should we go around the edge? There'll be a photo on Go Jauntily that says, can you see this signpost in front of you? Or walk down the hedge on your left, and a picture. Really helpful, really good for people to begin working. I've talked a bit about the support we can offer, so I'm probably going to rattle through this section, but we can help you develop a travel plan. So this is the Motive Stars thing. This is how we'll set up on that. We'll talk you through it. We'll give you some training on it. We'll help you complete sections with it. We'll give you some initiatives and some advice on how to develop that travel plan. So you've got that framework and that structure in place. And I think this is good for you to have as a business. It's something that you can talk to employees about. There are no kind of grey areas. It allows you to kind of crystallize your expectations as an employer, and everyone's kind of singing off the same hymn sheet. We can talk about financial support. So, we have various sort of pots of money that we receive that we can support change to active and sustainable travel. So we're talking to a business in East Suffolk at the moment about how we can potentially help them put in a shower room, and what financial support we can offer them. Obviously, we don't have an unlimited pot, and we have to spend our money effectively. So, if you're a smaller business and you've got, you're trying to get 1 or 2 people to walk or cycle to work, we're probably not going to be looking at perhaps £15,000 for a shower room. If you're a bigger business where there's 300 or 400 people, then that's a different conversation. So it's horses for courses. But even as a small business, there is financial support for some initiatives, and we're always looking for great case studies and businesses that are being really creative and coming up with great initiatives, and we will support those where we can. I've talked already about Motive Stars and how we will. It's free to sign up to, but as you progress through the levels, there are charges, and we will cover those charges for you, because obviously we want to encourage that and support you in that. And we can do free refresher cycling sessions, and we can provide you with a ride leader for guided rides. So we know that more than half of people who don't currently cycle would find training and guided rides useful, helpful. So we will sort those out for you. We will put in a bikeability instructor to help some people come back to riding. And then once they've done a couple of sort of training sessions, we'll give you a ride leader who will organise a safe and guided ride from your workplace. So this is what I talked about earlier, maybe on a Friday afternoon, finish an hour earlier, you as a business get the benefit and the kudos of putting on this ride, and we support you in that. Dr. Bike sessions I've mentioned, and we're happy to fund those for you, where we will get you know, a local bike shop to turn up, or a local bike repair person, and they'll do some free maintenance sessions. All we would ask is that when we organise that, we can book your employees in advance, so we know what level to scale up for, which is good. And you know, the busier we are, the better with those. Community cycling sessions. So maybe as a business, and particularly if you're in the service industry, there might be an opportunity for us to work with you in terms of bringing people to your business if we can set up a community cycling group that's based from it. So, you know, we are talking to, I mentioned Adams earlier, you know, we're looking at the possibility of seeing if we could use some of their pubs in some of our sort of villages as community cycling centres. There is a benefit for the community in that we put in the doctor bike session and a ride leader and some training that's funded by us. There's a benefit for that business in that if you're a pub and we're bringing 10 people to your pub on a Saturday morning, let's say, or a Saturday afternoon, you know, we might ask you to give them a coffee and a bacon roll free of charge to start with for the first couple of sessions, but you can bet a good number of those people are going to come back after their ride and they're going to have a pint or lunch or a drink afterwards. So there's a win-win to be had there. And if you're the sort of business where you feel, you know, you could benefit and you could contribute to your community, then we'd love to hear from you and we'd love to work with you to encourage and develop that. And then content creation. So I talked about how we can help you in terms of your business. So we've created travel information boards for businesses. We've created individual journey plans for people within businesses. We've created cycle maps for communities. So there's all kinds of support. And again, it's probably by having those sort of one-to-one conversations with businesses that we can work out how we can best support you and perhaps, you know, your community or your employees, and then we can kind of look at how we take that forwards. So really, that's it from me. As I mentioned, you know, the references here for everything that I've put there. You know, a lot of it based on very solid research. So, you know, please take to heart some of the stats we put in there. Thank you for your time. Please get in touch if you'd like to find out more about how we can support you in terms of your ambitions around active travel, either individually or as a business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Lots of facts and figures and information there to sort of digest, and lots of different ways around making just small changes, you know, can make big differences. So thank you very much for that. Chris, your contact details, was that on the previous slide, just so people can,
yes,
if you want more information, and also websites and all your links and things, it's great. Yes. So the poll, okay, are we?
Yep, sorry, I'll just launch a poll quickly.
Yep.
I'll come up on your screen. If you can just take a minute to answer the questions. It's obviously optional to complete. I'll leave that on in the background if you'd like to move on to the next slide.
Okay, and that's just more information about the Business Festival, where you can find out more information. Follow us on social media and our website, and all the recordings, as they are on the Business Festival website. And also Chris mentioned the cargo bikes, and that was a video that was done, a recording earlier in the week. So there's more information you can find about that as well. So yeah, are there any questions?
I was just going to ask Chris if that's okay. So if you are a business and want to start kind of their active travel journey within their workplace and employees, kind of what is the top kind of key things or points you'd tell them to kind of start with and start that journey on?
I think I mentioned sort of a couple of times about mode shift stars, and I think that's key. That does give us this framework to build on. It's sort of a tried and tested method, if you like. And we start mode shift stars with an employee survey. You know, we've got the questions for that. You know, we don't leave you as a business to kind of make them up. You know, we're looking 6-7 questions that you ask your employees, and that lets us know where we're starting from. We put that data into the Mode Shift Stars website. We then put in place half a dozen initiatives, and they can be really simple things. They can be things like putting in place a cycle to work scheme, is bike shelters, or you know, somewhere to lock a bike up. Our bus times displayed on the notice board where you work. They're really simple things like this. So we just start to put in place these nudges, if you like. You know, the team I work for is called the behaviour change team, and there's a lot of sort of behavioural theory that's applied, but we use what's called the COM theory, which is capability, opportunity, and motivation, and we use various nudges to sort of encourage people. So if we can put in place the capability, so that might mean that we then identify there's a need to deliver the riding sessions, the doctor bike sessions. Is there the opportunity? So, can people physically get a bus? Is there a bus route? Do they have access to a bike? And then the motivation, and that's where you as an employer would come in. So all of that builds on this Motive STARS framework. So we start by putting you on the STARS website, getting the framework in place and doing a survey.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions at the moment?
No. Okay, and that's just some information about the economic development team at East Suffolk Council. If anyone wants any more information on anything you've heard today or any of the sort of key topics and areas of work there. And then I think that's it for today. So thank you very much, Chris. Really great presentation and lots of information there to share for businesses. So thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.